We are so far removed from the idea of America and its monarchism written in the United States Constitution, where we have to bring her back to where she belongs. Thank you for listening to this episode of Chasing Life, Liberty, and Monarchy. Good evening and welcome to this episode of Chasing Life, Liberty, and Monarchy. I hope y'all had a great weekend. I hope you enjoyed everything it had to offer. Here in Florida, we had a whole lot of rain. Too much rain. Too much rain. Yes, too much rain. We got too much. But I do want to say before we get started on this show, rest in peace to Senator Lindsey Graham. I know a lot of you didn't like him, and I get it. I understand that. But one thing I will not take away from an individual like Lindsey Graham is that he served this country. He served this country. He ruffled a lot of feathers, but he served this country, and I cannot knock a man who has served this country. Well, let me take that back. I won't knock this particular man for serving this country. He took the oath. Some decisions bad, some decisions good, but all in all, I have faith that he voted with his conscience. I was never inside that man's brain or heart, so I'm not here to prejudge. The cesspool of America has spoken, will continue to speak. Ill will of people they may not like politically. I say shame on them for that, and go seek out their unresolved trauma, why they have their heart is so full of hatred of a person they don't even know. They just know the words they speak and what they've been told to think about that person. So that's all I'm gonna say about Lindsey Graham. We got a show to do. The Myth of Public Goods. Make sure everybody clicks like, subscribe, share this on your social media. Make sure you're following us on torturelibertymedia.com, notamendmentproject.org, and patreon.com/TOLMF. Make sure you're doing that. We're on episode 3 of our Boundless Watchman series, season 3, episode 3. Wow. We've done it. We keep doing it. So I wrote bullet points on this one. A lot of bullet points. So I'm going to be weaving in and out of stuff all evening because my brain decided to go to sleep on me earlier, and I had to weave in and out. So I had to write off the top of my head when we're talking about the myth of public goods and our monarchist framework that we've built. I came up with a few things. So bear with me as I weave you in and out of this whole thing, right? And I want to remind you as we go into this episode, right, that for many generations, right, when you push a status into a corner, on the efficiency of the free market, okay, they will always retreat to the same exact academic bunker. All right. They stop talking about welfare. They stop talking about social engineering, and they pull it out of the holy grail of interventionist economics, the theory of public goods, as I've called it. They look at you with this smugness, right? And ask you, what about the lighthouses? What about the clean air you breathe? Hmm? What about deep fundamental scientific research? Right? I'm kind of explaining the lighthouse fallacy here, right? If you haven't caught on to it yet, right? If an entrepreneur cannot easily exclude non-payers from benefiting, the market will fail. It will underproduce and leave society in the dark. Therefore, you must have a coercive state tax apparatus. Yes. This is the academic trap they have woven in their little bunkers to get you. Aha, what about the roads? Aha. Where do you get the money to fix the roads? Aha. Right? We hear that all the time as libertarians. We hear it all the time, right? What about the roads? Oh my God, who's going to pay for the roads? You got money, right? You can sign a mutual contract, right? Oh, okay. I mean, I'm just saying. See, this theory has been taught in every introductory economics textbook from Harvard down to your local community college for probably the last 100 years. But it relies on a fundamental and foundational lie that human innovation is static and that exclusion requires a bureaucrat with a gun. Right? And this is how these statists think. They want the big bad government to impose their will and what they want behind the firearm while they're sitting in the comfort of their own homes. They're kicking someone else's door in to take their money in their name. Isn't that what they do? But this thing under the strict boundaries of our constitutional republic. We look at the life portion of our foundational rights through a completely different lens. Because life is not preserved by state monopolies. Life is sustained, protected, and elevated by the relentless engine of private innovation. Today, this evening, wherever you are in the world, whichever one you take in today, wherever you are in the world today, we're going to smash the final intellectual dishonest excuse for state expansion. And we're going to dismantle the myth of public goods or the good of welfare. I think that's probably better, right? Because it's all one and the same, right? Public goods is just another name for welfare, right? I know I try to fancy it up, but you know, little me. But anyway, make sure you guys are like and subscribe to all that good stuff. To the show and get this shirt out. Let's get at this, right? The Main Street economists, right? They always talk about a public good or the greater good, right? And they define it using two strict technical criteria. It must be non-rivalrous, meaning my consumption of the good doesn't reduce the amount available to you. And it must be non-excludable, which also means there is no particular or practical way to stop someone who hasn't paid from enjoying the benefit. Because of these two traits, They claim the free market experiences a free rider program and will systematically fail. Okay. It will systematically fail because it'll fail to allocate capital efficiently to build it. Right. And this particular theory that these economists put out there, right, has served as the ultimate cover story, right? Or as some of us like to say, run game, right, for the expansion of the unconstitutional administrative state. See, every time a federal agency wants to seize control of an industry, grab land, or create a $1 trillion subsidy loop, what did he do? They brand their project in the name of the greater good or a public good, right? They've used it to, one, nationalize scientific research. They use it to create politicized grant cartels like the NSF and the NIH, right? That fund ideological compliant projects while choking out disruptive independent science. Where have we heard that before? Didn't we hear that during COVID? We heard that during COVID, didn't we? The NIH said ivermectin is no good. Ivermectin didn't help COVID. But right in their same annals, when people started reading the research out of the NIH, they found that ivermectin was effective against coronaviruses, like the cold, right? Coronavirus, ivermectin is effective, right? Is against cancer. But they had everybody, right? This grant medical grant cartel had everybody thinking that ivermectin was just horse paste, and and people did dumb shit with the ivermectin. Don't get me wrong. That couple that got severely poisoned. I think the guy died. I think if I remember correctly. Y'all correct me if I'm wrong, or it's not even relevant, right? You don't have people that do stupid things because stupid is as stupid does, right? You also have people doing things out of desperation. And that is the fault of these medical grant cartels, right? We're not going there. The show's not about that. But this kind of should give you like how they've nationalized these things and weaponized them at the same time against the people, right? And silenced physicians that were speaking out against them in the COVID shot and COVID itself, right? But anyway, we're gonna move away from that a second, right? Because I got a lot on my mind. I got to get out of my brain here, right? So with that, right, the use of the public good, they turned environmental protection into a weaponized regulatory machine, like the EPA, right? Which they actually use arbitrary administrative edicts to dictate how you can use your own private land under the guise of protecting airsheds and navigable waters. Huh? Hmm? That EPA wasn't strong when Monsanto, their Roundup was sinking into the groundwater, huh? EPA wasn't effective then, huh? But they'll come to your house and tell you, oh, you can't dig that well right there. Oh, you can't spray that on your crops. You gotta spray this, and the shit they want you to spray on your crops is what's killing your crops and tainting the soil. But anyway, I'm not getting into that. I'm just showing you how the government uses federal agencies to weaponize against the people in the name of the greater good or a public good. But I got good news. Because your local resident minarchist, Rod, sitting here, right? In my world, I would demand we strip away the state of the economic weapon, right? Because in the minimal state framework we have created, the government does not fund laboratories, it does not manage natural resources, and it doesn't build lighthouses, right? The watchman's shield exists to enforce property boundaries and punish fraud, nothing more, right? Today, we look at the concrete technological and legal mechanisms that turn what the statists call market failures into highly profitable, hyper efficient private enterprises. So let's look at the classic textbook example that started this whole mess, the lighthouse, right? For a century, legacy and old school economists like John Stuart Mill, what's another one off the top of my head? Paul Samuelson, right? Y'all know I'm not an econ guy, but some of these guys are very instrumental in the building of this nonsense we have today. But anyway, we'll leave that alone, right? But these type of economists claim that private enterprise can never build a lighthouse because you cannot stop a passing ship from seeing the beam of light and navigate safely by it. If you can't exclude them, you can't charge them, and the business goes bankrupt. Now, the only problem with this textbook theory is that it is completely historically illiterate. Okay. As the legendary economist Ronald Coase proved in 19th century England, it was illuminated by a vast, highly efficient network of private lighthouses built by entrepreneurs. How did they solve the non excludability problem without a tax collector? They used bundled services and consolidated port covenants. We've talked about covenants before on this show, haven't we? In the last series, right? In season 2, right? And Beyond the Shield, right? We talked about the covenants, right? Oh, okay. It's kind of funny how these things come back into play, right? Oh, okay. Anyway, right? Let's keep in mind these private lighthouse operators didn't try to chase down ships at sea to demand payment. Instead, they partnered with the private harbor masters. And when a ship docked at a port to load or unload cargo, they were charged a single consolidated harbor fee. A specified portion of that fee went directly to fund the lighthouse network that secured the shipping lanes leading into that port. If a ship refused to pay the fee, they were denied docking rights, blacklisted from the trade network, and stripped of their contractual insurance protections, right? And this exclusion didn't happen on the open water, it happened at the point of commerce. Now, I bring that up. I bring this up because look at what Donald Trump did in the Straits of Hormuz the first time, and now he's employing the second time, right? He ain't let no ships through that strait, is he? They're acting as the private lighthouse. You can't come through here unless you pay up. Hmm? I'm not going to get deep into that conversation, but I just want to put that out there for you. Look at it's posted. CENTCON has it posted. The first time they blocked the Straits of Hormuz and the ports of Iran, and what they're doing now. And come back to this analogy I just gave you about the lighthouses and tell me if it's not the exact same framework. It's literally the same exact framework. You just replace ships with lighthouses, right? I mean, what do I know? Anyway, I'm not an economist. I just pretend to be one at night. Yeah. So when we look at the contemporary landscape, right, maritime logistics has moved light years beyond oil lamps and mirrors. Yet the state continues to mandate its bureaucratic presence, right? The government, right? The federal government uses the Coast Guard and the Department of Transportation to monopolize maritime safety, right? Extracting billions of dollars in general taxation and custom duties to manage infrastructure. And the results are predictable: bureaucratic inefficiency, tech lag, and complete insulation for real world market utility. Now, you remember the first episode we did about the contractual city model? Let's go there a second, right? Because maritime safety and navigation infrastructure are completely private sourced. So if a shipping cartel or independent port development corporation wants to secure its multi-billion-dollar trade routes, they form a private infrastructure consortium, right? They build the beacons, deploy the automated satellite navigation buoys, and fund them through automated smart contract fees tied directly to logistics, shipping manifest, and dockage agreements. The state's only role is the watchman's shield, to step in via the courts if a rogue vessel attempts to physically sabotage a private buoy or violate a port's private property lines or commit fraud on a shipping contract. The market secures the channel, the contract settles the bill. It's not that hard. It's not that hard. It's very simple here. Now, let's talk about the five slammer jammer. Let's talk about the environment, because the statists will look at air pollution and say the air is not excludable. If a factory pours sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere and it drifts over thousands of homes, the market cannot price this. So we need a massive federal agency to issue carbon credits, cap and trade regulations, and thousands of pages of compliance code. That's what the statists will tell you, right? But let's really talk about this a minute, right? Because what the status is asking you is to relinquish property rights and ex post torts. Let me explain that a second, right? Because we know what property rights are, but again, do you really own your property? Right? That's the question. Do you really own your property? No. You still have to, even though you bought your house, you have to pay taxes on the land the house sits on. Right? Think about that a second. You own your house, right? But you pay the government a tax to keep your house on that land. And if you just happen not to pay it, they seize your house and they sell it, don't they? When we're talking about also property rights, we have to talk about mineral rights, surface rights, and air rights. Let's think about this a second. You know about surface rights because you pay taxes on that. Mineral rights is you have the rights to everything that's under the soil, right? But nobody talks about air rights. Because the federal government, watch this, the federal government through the FAA controls domestic airspace up to flight level 600. Now, those of you that are not familiar with airspeak or whatever, flight level 600 is 60,000 feet, right? So, yeah, explain this a little better. I know this is getting off track, but this is this so you get an understanding of this, right? The upper limit, right, which is called Class A, is between 18,000 and 60,000 feet. Now, those of you that have flown on an airplane, right? Watch this. Those of you that have flown on an airplane, what is the first thing they tell you when the plane is taxiing on the tarmac? What do they tell you? What's one of the first precautions they tell you? One thing they tell you to do: put your phones into airplane mode. Remember, this is not the airline telling you to do this. This is a federal regulation. Anytime a plane from takeoff to 18,000 feet, your cell phones cannot be on. And if they so deem fit, they could fine you if they knew your phone was on under 18,000 feet. I want you to think about that. And then you get up the supposedly 10,000 feet and you hear the boom, boom. Once they hit that 10,000 feet, they're really at 18,000 feet at that point. They're just literally hitting 8,000 by the time you hear that tone because they're going up so fast, right? Then you can turn your Wi-Fi on. But you can't turn your signal. Again, it's federal regulation. You can't turn it on. Right? Now, once you get above 60,000 feet, right? That's not technically controlled airspace, but they don't provide any air traffic separation because let's keep in mind, no standard air breathing aircraft can sustain flight at that altitude, right? This is where your space vehicles go through. Weather balloons are up there, military spy planes. This is why do you remember when the whole Chinese thing and the whole spy balloon was flying over where we kicked the Minuteman III missiles out up in Montana? Oh, we should go shoot it down. No plane can reach that. No plane can reach that at 60,000 plus. No plane can fly that high, right? They didn't shoot it down until it got over where it got lower altitude. When it got down under 40,000 feet, they could shoot it down, right? But I know that's getting a little too much, right? And then now let's think about closer to the ground, right? 18,000, right? From ground level to 18,000 feet, right? This is where you have the quote unquote general highway system for your smaller planes, things of that nature, right? I'm not going to get into all that, right? But this is how they control your air rights. Because remember, even if you have a drone on your landing, you put that thing in the air, you don't have control. You do not own that air above your private property. You have to have a license to fly that drone even on your property. You got to have a license to fly it on your property. You don't own the air from the ground up. You don't own it, but you should. It's part of your property, right? Just something to something to think about. We're talking about these property rights, right? Now, back to the topic. Now that you understand, we're talking about reclaiming our property rights, things of that nature, right? The environmental crisis that's being manufactured is it's not a market failure, right? It is a property rights failure engineered by the state itself. I just kind of explained it with the air rights thing, right? Because historically, under common law, if a factory blew smoke onto your laundry or pours in your well water, you sued them for trespass and nuisance, right? The courts would issue an immediate injunction, shut down the factory until they internalize their costs and stop violating your property boundaries. But I want you to listen to this. During the Industrial Revolution, okay, the state stepped in and overrode the courts. Politicians argued that the public good of industrial progress outweighed individual property rights. Let me say that again. The people like the Rockefeller, Standard Oil, right? Those types, the Vanderbilts, right? Those types, right? Paid or became politicians to argue that the public good of industrial progress outweighed individual property rights. They sure did. Which basically gave factories carte blanche to legally pollute. Now, the modern EPA simply just continues this trend by setting acceptable levels of pollution, right? Creating a state sanctioned right to violate your property up to a certain metric. But never fear, right? When we come back to our strict minarchist framework, we replace the administrative regulations with strict liability tort law, right? Which would supercharge it since we have the technology, right? We'll supercharge it with environmental sensor tech, right? And through decentralized, localized IoT sensors, right? And the network you would create from that, deployed within our contractual city, we can track air and water quality metrics in real time. If a private industry plant discharges a chemical plume or particulates, the sensors log the exact chemical signature, timestamp, and directional vector on to a immutable ledger. Because see, right now, right, in our current environment, mega corporations like Jefferson Smurfit and many others like it, right, hide behind federal compliance certificates. If an industrial plant stays within the EPA's arbitrary bureaucratic limits, a private property owner faces a virtually impossible legal battle to prove damages because the courts treat a government permit as a legal shield for the corporate actor. The state has commodified pollution rather than protecting individual property lines. Prime example, your high voltage tension lines that you see everywhere on what's on the public right of way, but you have homes underneath them or near them within. I'm just I'm just putting that out there. Y'all have seen it. I don't care what state you're in. You've seen it. But let's realign this in the name of monarchy and liberty, right? Because we would need to evict the bureaucrat from the environment, right? The state, let's just call it what it is. The state doesn't pass clean air acts or mandate green transitions, right? Instead, our courts, right? Our minarchist courts enforces the strict definition of property trespass. If an industrial plant throws a single particulate of soot onto your private roof, they have initiated an unconsented physical invasion of your property. Armed with immutable sensor data, property owners file an immediate tort claim. The court commands full restitution for the property damage and issues an injunction to halt operations until the factory installs closed loop filtration technology. The market cleans the air because polluting becomes an immediate path to corporate bankruptcy. What do y'all think of that? I thought about that all on my own. Hope y'all are enjoying this. All this good stuff. I know I'm kind of running. I'm all over the place. I didn't have time to actually write everything out, so I'm just kind of go off of what I remembered earlier. I think I'm doing pretty good. Let me know if I'm doing good in the chat, y'all. Let me know if I'm doing good. I'm trying, y'all. I'm trying. Oh yeah. So the statists, when they talk about the scientific research, we talked about that in the beginning, right? Their argument for the scientific research, right? Because they'll tell you that pure fundamental scientific discovery, like mapping the genome or quantum physics or space exploration, is a public good. Well, as we've seen recently, the last 10 years, that's a lie. We haven't had a NASA since when? And who is shooting rockets into space? Oh, the private sector is. Oh, Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, because they're the only two mofos in America have enough money to do some shit like that. Right? Like they got past throwaway money. They got money to they hire people to throw away their money. And then the people that are throwing their money hires people to help them throw away the money. That's how much money Elon Musk got and Jeff Bezos. They got just that extra throwaway money. I wish they throw some over here, but you know, throw a quick milli. You know what I mean? Like I think everybody can use a quick milli. You know what I'm saying? Just throw the quick milli at all was we right. But anyway, um, the statists claim that because like basic research doesn't have an immediate commercial application, right? And that private companies won't invest in it. Hello, SpaceX. Oh, anyway, did I say that? So what so they're forcing the state, right, to tax you to fund the military industrial academic complex, because that's basically what space exploration is, science exploration is, right? It's part of the whole military academic complex, right? Um, but the status argument ignores the historical reality that the grandest leaps in human history, from the Industrial Revolution to the birth of the digital age, were overwhelmingly driven by private capital and independent laboratories and commercial competitive incentives, right? And when the state nationalizes the funding of science through centralized grant panels, it creates a corrupt monoculture. Scientists spend 80% of their time writing proposals designed to please a panel of bureaucratic gatekeepers, resulting in safe, stagnant, consensus driven research that protects the institutional status quo. But in our world, our minarchist world, basic research is funded through two powerful market mechanisms. You may have heard one form of these at one point in time. One is proprietary commercial bundling, and the other is dominant assurance contracts. See, modern technology allows mega consortiums of private tech companies, medical cartels, and venture funds to pool resources into basic research because they understand that the entity that controls the downstream applied engineering wins the market. So, with that, through decentralized smart contract platforms, communities can utilize cryptographic crowdfunding frameworks to fund fundamental research. Now, a a dominant assurance contract, okay, and we'll shift there a second, right? A dominant assurance contract ensures that if a research goal isn't met or the funds aren't fully raised to hire the top tier private labs, all capital is instantly returned to the investor with interest, removing the risk profile. Now, if we look at the current expansion of our federal government into this, right, how they've basically gobbled that up and taken that away from the people, right? Federal agencies, like we explained before, they weaponize scientific funding to control public policy, right, and manipulate public consensus. Insert ivermectin. Insert COVID vaccine shot, right? We see grants pulled from any researcher who challenges the administrative state's official narrative on medicine, energy, or economics, right? See it all the time. Look, Dr. McCullough, right? Dr. Wolf, Dr. Stella Emanuel, right? We saw this in real time, right? Science, and I've thought about this, and I had to write this statement down so I'd remember it exactly. Then I reworded it, but I'm gonna say this out loud, right? Science has been effectively turned into a state subsidized priesthood designed to legitimize bureaucratic control over your daily choices. I want y'all to really think about what I just said because it's true. They fail to recognize gender dysphoria as a real thing. So what do? Oh, the men can go in girls' bathrooms. Hmm? You need to go take that COVID shot because you won't be able to go out in public without the shot and the mask. You can't go shopping without the mask. You see the state subsidized priesthood I'm talking about? Do you hear what I'm saying? But see, we have to separate science from the state completely, right? The state has zero authority under the Constitution to spend a single dollar on a laboratory, a telescope, or a medical research paper. See, the night watchman in our minarchist government would guard the patent titles and the intellectual property contracts of the innovators, right? But it leaves the pursuit of knowledge entirely to the free association of brilliant minds. Private foundations, corporate R&D divisions, and decentralized voluntary crowd funds, right? compete to solve the great riddles of the universe, right? The science that directly improves human life is funded because it creates massive, tangible value. The junk science, the pseudosciences that serve nothing but bureaucratic expansion dies from the lack of market demand. So, in closing, I hope I laid it out and I was coherent through the whole thing. I hope so. See, the theory of public goods is nothing more than an intellectual security blanket for people who are terrified of the radical efficiency of a free society. It is the ultimate academic excuse for you to be managed, as the statists would say, right? Why your property must be taxed and why a central planner must decide the path of human progress. But watchman, the watchman, the boundless watchman is standing at the perimeter line and he is shining a light so bright and piercing directly onto that fallacy, right? We don't need a coercive state to build lighthouses or clean the air or reach for the stars. Every single thing required to sustain and elevate human life can be achieved through the beautiful, uncoerced architecture of the voluntary market. When you remove the state monopoly, you don't get chaos. You unlock a renaissance of, of human engineering where every dollar spent, every line of code written, and every brick laid is backed by a contract, verified by a ledger, and driven by the pure pursuit of excellence. I got a job for y'all. I got a job for y'all this week, my fellow minarchist and conservative light folks. I want you to go to your county or city's website and look at the major public projects in your county or your city and look at your state university system or look at your local municipal environmental boards, right? And that'd be your locally, that'd be your zoning and planning commission is most of that, right? And calculate how much tax money is wasted on administrative overhead and ideological posturing. Because I want people to stop believing the lie that without a politician, you'd be left stranded in the dark. I want people to reclaim their internal locus of control. Recognize that the market isn't just a place to buy and sell goods, it is the supreme infrastructure for human cooperation. I appreciate y'all tuning in, all that good stuff. Make sure you share, like, subscribe, all those things. With this show and others, make sure if you haven't subscribed to the audio side of this, make sure you do that wherever you get podcast at. Make sure you're on the patreon.com/TOLMF, Torch of Liberty Media Foundation, Torch of Liberty Media.com, and Ninth Amendment Project.org. And with that being said, make sure you join us next Monday for episode 4 called the Arbitration Shield, where I will dive into the deep legal architecture of private arbitration and polycentric law, proving that justice can cross state lines flawlessly under Article 4 of the United States Constitution without a massive bureaucratic entity or bureaucracy as a whole to regulate it. Until next time, y'all, remember, love your families, love your neighbors, but ultimately, love yourselves. Until next time, y'all, peace and love.